The views and opinions expressed by the host of this podcast are solely of their own and do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, and policies of their employees, affiliates, sponsors, or any other entities associated with them. The content provided in this podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only and should not be construed as professional advice. Listeners are encouraged to independently verify any information discussed and consult with the appropriate professionals and advice tailored to their specific circumstances. Now enjoy the podcast.
When the degree of reward uncertainty, so there is an uncertainty to the reward,
Yeah.
the number of brain cells are activated or brain areas are activated.
Okay. I think I struggled with making decisions for a long time in my life. I don't think it's an easy thing for a lot of people to do. I'm not going to say I'm an expert either, but I was a part of this mentorship program and they gave me this blueprint that I think helped like with my last step of like at least knowing how to make decisions. You know, sometimes we know information and we don't act on it all the time.
Yeah.
So this at least helped with like 2 layers of decision making. And I'm going to tell you right now that I heavily operate in 2 of these. Dog runs away. I feel nervous. I feel scared. And that's all that happens initially. The next thing, okay, which is maybe the most important part of today's episode, okay is this next step. Welcome to That's On That podcast, where we navigate the twists and turns of this unpredictable journey and are inviting you to join us in candid conversations, heartfelt reflections, and even a few laughs along the way. I'm Leo, your co-host, and I'm here with Bree. Let's get to the podcast. Good. We're here now. I can hear you good. Can you hear me good?
I can hear you. All right.
These fucking flies too. Lobo, you're on the clock permanently. All right, welcome back to That's On That podcast.
Yeah.
How are we doing, Miss Bree?
I'm good. How are you, man?
Yeah, I'm tired.
Tired?
Yeah.
It's been a week and it's Tuesday.
It's Tuesday.
It's
Happy Tuesday, everybody.
Happy Tuesday.
Yeah. Let's jump right into it, though, because I'm sure that people are itching to hear what we have to say this week because it is part 2 of decision making. Part 2. And I failed to mention this the last time, but there are some visual things. So if you're listening on Spotify, you should also be able to see the video. So at some points, you might want to peep into either the last episode or this episode to see, because I may be like pointing at some things to describe what we're talking about. So, yeah, last week was all about decision making. We really hashed out like how some people make decisions. And we decided that there's 5 steps that everybody takes. And the 5 steps are on my board, like Vanna White. Step number 1 is the action, okay? The action that actually happens. After that, there is an emotion that typically is sparked from that action. Step 3 is there is a reaction, okay? How you naturally actually respond. And then steps 4 and 5 are the thought and actual response, okay? After you thought it out, what happens? So I want to draw a line in the sand. Boom, line in the sand, okay? So there's 2 different parts of your brain that we're going to talk about today. I'm not going to get too detailed in it because I'm not the expert. We have an expert on the call. But there's 2 parts of your brain. And one of them manages your emotions, okay? You're early on in the process. You know, your brain automatically looks at this part right here. It hits that emotional step number 2. And it's probably got a little bit of this reaction involved in it, okay? So a lot of times, like, it manages and is linked to your memories, okay? It can contribute or cause like disruptive feelings or symptoms naturally. Like there's a lot of emotional things that happen without you even having to think about it, which is the second part of this, or the second part of the brain that we're going to talk about. And that's a lot of your abilities, your reasoning, so simple, complex processing of information. That's that second part of the brain that we're going to talk about. So there's a part of the brain that does step 2 and 3, and there's another one that's a part of 4 and 5. But I'm going to pass it over to Bree, because I think you got some really good nuggets in that nugget of yours that can be beneficial for all of us.
Yes, I love little nuggets. Thank you, Vanna, for your excellent demonstration. Much appreciated. Yeah, so I love this stuff. I love nerding out on bits of the body. And your brain is, we kind of touched on this a little bit last week, but it's like the sea, the ocean of the body, right? There's just so much to it that is still undiscovered. But what we do know, as you mentioned, there are sections of the brain that we know quite a bit of. One of them being the amygdala. The amygdala it's a little part in the center of your brain, and this is what deals with your emotions. This is where all your memories and your emotions are all kind of stored, and this is where the reactions to those things comes from, right? This is the part of the brain that sends out this, it receives and sends out the signals for the emotions. And then that second part of the brain that you talked about that deals with the reasoning that contributes into number 4 on your board. That is the section I like to call, yes, thank you. I like to call that the thought brain, right? Because we have kind of an emotional brain, and then we have a thought brain, a thinking brain. And this is the frontal lobe. So this is where all of your logic and your decision-making abilities come from. So when you decide what shoe to put on first in the morning when you're getting ready, that is processed out of your frontal lobe. When you decide what route to take when you're driving to and from work, that's processed in your frontal lobe. When you have critical thinking decisions that you need to make in business or in leadership or in, I don't know, how you want to interact with a friend, how you approach that, that is a decision made in your frontal lobe. Fun fact about the frontal lobe, it's not fully developed until you're in like your mid-20s, upwards of 30s. So, I mean...
So you're telling me I may not be making the wisest decisions up until mid-20s or 30s.
Yeah.
And then I max out somewhere around 30s? Is that what you're saying? I max out on the amount of reasoning I have?
No, you don't max out on the amount of reasoning that you have, but that's just when that part of your brain, that's all right here in your forehead, that's when that part is actually fully developed.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. But isn't it crazy? Like, think about, I know when I was like 18, like, I can make big girl decisions. I know all there is to know about, like, I moved out when I was 18 and thought I could handle life as an adult. Because by law, I was an adult, right?
Yeah.
But
Big girl.
I was a big girl, but not so much because I did not make the best of choices at that time because I didn't have a good, solid, logical thought brain because it wasn't developed yet. Anyway, yeah.
Happens.
Yeah, right. So in looking into this a little bit further, one thing that I found was there was a study that I found that observes different regions of the brain. And what's really cool is with the technology and the imaging and the science and all of the fun jazz that we have nowadays, you can actually, they do these studies and these tests where they put somebody in an MRI that does a brain scan, basically, and they can actually see what parts of your brain light up with activity. It looks like little light bulbs bloop, bloop, coming off in the different areas of your brain based on the decisions that you're making, based on they take into account factors of like if there's risk involved, different parts of your brain are going to light up like a freaking Christmas tree on what decisions that you're making. One study that I looked at basically shows that when the degree of reward uncertainty is increased, the number of activated brain cells are increased.
When the degree of reward is increased in the... Say that again?
When the degree of reward uncertainty, so there is an uncertainty to the reward,
yeah,
the number of brain cells are activated or brain areas are activated.
Okay.
Yeah, right? So, like, it's just, I don't know. I find this stuff absolutely fascinating. Some areas that they show light up significantly include the orbital and the frontal cortex. Those are like areas behind your eyes and up in your forehead. Your prefrontal lobe, which is like the very tip, the anterior cingulate cortex, the amygdala, hippocampus, which is another area in the center of your brain, cerebellum and the midbrain, which are in the brainstem, and all of that. So they really go in depth with the decisions and how, like, the varying degree of the decision that you're actually making and what part of the brain it's correlated with. It's interesting. So yeah, we'll make sure to share a link so that you can read up on the nerdy stuff with me. Yeah. So
That's crazy.
Right?
And a lot of that is like over my head.
The brain's crazy. The brain like it's, I don't know. I get really quite fascinated by it, but also exceptionally overwhelmed because it's literally computing every millisecond since we're born, right? And it's like there's so much between the little, like, what, 6 inches between your ears. That's just, there's so much going on up there, and it's crazy. It's crazy. But yeah. Anyway, so when we are making decisions, we tend to form opinions and we choose our actions via mental processes, which are influenced by biases, reason, emotions, and our memories. So these are, there's an article I found in Psychology Today that discusses the 4 styles of decision making. So basically, right, we've got 4 styles. We have directive, conceptual, analytical, and behavioral.
Okay. You gonna break those down for me?
I sure am. So directive decision making are decisions based on information that we've already gained from previous experiences. So we have lived through a similar enough or an identical situation before. Like, I've been here, done that. I know what to do. Okay. Then we have conceptual, which they also label as abstract decision making. This is where you look at the big picture and you take into account potential future variables and other, like, stakeholder opinions and ideas in it. So this is something, like, for me, I use this a lot, like, when I'm dealing with big life decisions, right? Because I have kind of this idea of what I want my life to look like at the end, right? So when all is said and done and I have grown up in life, right? And I am where I want to be, I know roughly what I want it to look like. And I used to have this activity where it's like I have this, like, 4K high-res definition or high-res image of what I want my life to look like. And then anything, like any decision that I have to make, if it doesn't fit into that, I don't do it. Okay. So that's the conceptual thought process. Then we move into analytical, which is your more logical decision-making processes. This takes into account any and all available data. So this is going to be your, how do I put this?
This is like factual things, or this is past experiences as well?
Yep. Nope. This is like facts. This is, I need the numbers before I can make any type of decision, right? Okay. Because they have to analyze and evaluate everything, right? We got to know absolutely everything there is to know about the thing, so I know which decision to make. And then the last is behavioral. And this is, you see these a lot in individuals who have a high priority for making sure that everybody is happy and that everyone is getting along and agrees with the outcomes. These are your people pleasers. Hi, hello. I do that sometimes. But I'm a recovering people pleaser, so
congratulations on that.
I try not to do that. Thank you. It's been a lot of work. It's a lot of work to do that. So, yeah. What do you think on those? Where do you think you fall into that? I'm curious.
My instinct says that I'm the factual person. I need to hear the data. I need to see the stats, see the history, in order to make a decision. That's typically where I sit. That's what I'd like to think, but it's probably a little bit more like emotional than that. You know, it's
Yeah.
probably not always like seeing the data because there's a lot of things I'm like, I think I can make it work with life. So
Yeah. Yeah.
shares a lot
I
of
get that.
Yeah.
I get that. So from what I have experienced in knowing you, you tend to make pretty all right decisions. Like, I haven't really heard of one that's really been terrible for you. Instantly.
Except for today.
So I'm curious, what tips and tricks do you have to, or what ways do you improve your decision making processes?
So I actually, I think I struggled with making decisions for a long time in my life. I don't think it's an easy thing for a lot of people to do. I'm not going to say I'm an expert either, but I was a part of this mentorship program, and they gave me this blueprint that I think helped, like with my last step of like at least knowing how to make decisions. You know, sometimes we know information and we don't act on it all the time.
Yeah.
So this at least helped with like 2 layers of decision making. And I'm going to tell you right now that I heavily operate in 2 of these. Okay, the 2 extremes, because there's 4 parts to what I'm about to say. Okay. And I want you to think of a tree. Okay. There's 4 parts of the tree that we're going to talk about. One of them is the leaf. The other one, if you go further down, is the branch. You go further down is the trunk. And then one last layer is the root. Okay. The leaf decision is like very fleeting, light. If you take a leaf off of the tree, it's not going to kill the tree. It's not going to affect pretty much anything except for that leaf. Okay? So pretty much like the thought process here is like, if it's a leaf decision, that means you make the decision, act on it, and then move on. Okay. You don't need to report the action that you took to anybody. Like if you're a leader, you don't need to report it or whatever. You just like take the action, or make the decision, take the action, and then move on. Okay. At the branch level, you need to make the decision, act on it, and then maybe you need to look back on that action a day or 2, or a week or 2, or a month or 2, or something like that, because it has a little bit more effect in some of the rest of the tree, or it probably does 100% affect all the leaves that were on it.
Okay.
So a little bit more thought in the branch decision. And the trunk decision, you need to make the decision, check with yourself, check with other people who it might be affecting, like all those things now you have to like think about before you even make the decision. The past 2, it's like, hey, I can go make the decision, I can act on that decision, and then kind of move forward. Now it's like, hey, I am thinking about this decision. I probably need to check with myself before I make it, and then I need to act on it.
Okay.
And then the last one, the root. These are the decisions made with the most people because they could be life-changing, or not could be, they are life-changing decisions. 100% for you, and maybe 95% or 90% for other people. And not just like one other person, it's like a lot of other people. And this happens like everything. This happens in your personal life as well as your professional life too, when you're doing this like decision tree. So yeah, four things I like to look at. Again, number 1, it's just look at the tree. There's leaf, there's branch, trunk, and root. The root, this is where I'm saying I operate in 2 leaf decisions. I literally flip a coin, whatever decision is, do it, and I move on. That's what I've started to do. Okay.
Yeah, I've made some decisions like that, and they actually turned out to be some of the best decisions that I've made.
Yeah. I think it's a great way to alleviate the stress on the decision too. A lot of people don't make decisions because it's just stressful.
Yes.
And then the opposite one is the root decisions. I always write down a pros and cons list. I talk to my 5 closest friends about the decision, and I go back and take their input. There's way more people involved in this. So, yeah, those are my 4 tips for how you should handle decision making.
I love that. I think that's great, and I think everyone's going to benefit from hearing about that.
Yeah, if they take the action on it.
That's where it's at.
Yeah.
Yes. So, got anything else for us on that, Leo?
No. I think that's on that. I think that's on decision making.
That's on
part
decision
2.
making.
Part dos.
I agree.
Yeah. So thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Bree, for sharing so much information, giving us terms. I got to replay this a couple times to get all the terms that you threw at us. But I'm gonna take this 5 action steps along with the knowledge of where it's happening in my brain to now make some decisions. So, thank you.
Yes. Happy decision making. Bye. And that's on that, guys. Don't forget, anonymously or otherwise, we want to hear from you. So make sure to reach out to us at that'sonThatEpisode@gmail.com. You can also find us on Instagram and Twitter. Our handle there is @that'sonThatPod. We're going to be posting episodes weekly, and we'll also have some solo pop-up episodes here and there as thoughts and ideas pop up in our individual lives. So make sure that you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of that. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. We really hope that you stick around and enjoy this journey with us. We will see you next week.
Next week on That's on That.
Things are external to you, you don't have control over. But intrinsic motivation, it's all on you. You have the control to make that attempt and make that failure and decide, am I going to piss, moan, and whine about having this failure, or am I going to learn why I failed and try and repeat the process without doing that thing that caused that? Right?
Yeah.
That's how talent is built. Gotcha.
And something that he dove into, which is like probably going to be the core of this episode here, was the myelin sheath. This whole book was about myelin sheath.